Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/PettyRevenge. In today's episode, tease me for wearing non-branded shoes for a PE lesson? Enjoy not being able to wear your fancy branded trainers. Pandemic business loans. Why did the auditor cross the road? Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Tease me for wearing non-branded shoes for a PE lesson? Enjoy not being able to wear your fancy branded trainers. When I started high school, I forgot my PE kit on the first day. I had to borrow shorts and a shirt from the school. However, they had a rule where if one person forgot their trainers, the whole class had to do the PE lesson in bare feet. This was for health and safety to avoid people's bare feet getting stood on with a trainer. Suffice to say, everyone in my class was unhappy with this. For the second PE lesson, I brought my kit. My trainers at the time were non-branded and therefore cheaper. I got teased mercilessly about this, as everyone else had Nike, Adidas, etc. So I decided I would forget my trainers again the next week. This meant everyone had to have bare feet. The boys in my class didn't like this, probably because your feet got dirty from the floor and they just preferred wearing trainers. But I didn't really mind. I kept on doing this for the rest of the term just to teach them a lesson. Some would complain to the teacher that I was doing it deliberately, but they just used to shrug and reiterate the safety rules. Pandemic business loans. I recently started to see a trend of small, long-established businesses deciding to close. Businesses that have been around since the 1960s or many even earlier than that. These businesses seem to be rock solid and withstood the test of time. Many of these took out loans during the pandemic. A local restaurant just closed and I asked the owner why he closed now and not during the pandemic. He said that he was able to continue operating throughout the pandemic because of the small business pandemic loans. However, he said that he never developed a long-term plan to pay back the loans because he said he was planning on going out of business anyway. I asked him, is the bank going to try to collect from you? He replied, this business has been around for so long that it relies on its own credit and no individual is linked to this business for credit purposes. Malicious compliance was that the government encouraged businesses to take out loans, so this restaurant did and used it as a life raft for a 3-year plan to shut down with no intention of paying back. The restaurant owner told me he followed the rules of the loan program exactly and everything he did was legal. Edit, somewhat related and unrelated tangent. I don't know much about business, but number of these responses made me think of Walt Disney. He was miraculous at following the letter of the law to his benefit. Walt Disney had a number of failed companies before he struck it rich. I wonder how many bankruptcies and defaults his companies had that he walked away from before he finally struck it rich. Why did the auditor cross the road? Because they looked in the file and that's what was done last year. For those of you reading this that have never worked in audit, let me give you some background. Each job is run by an audit manager, and basically their word goes. Now the first rule of audit is you start with the walkthroughs, going through the entire process with an example transaction, technically in case you need to make any changes to the testing approach or risk assessment, but practically it's mostly so that you know what you're doing for the testing. But for this particular job, Deborah booked me in for a week of testing off-site before visiting the client for a walkthrough. And the working paper, spreadsheet we record test results on, was atrocious. I have 6 different reports for each sample transaction and the WP doesn't detail which report the information is from. The formula used to calculate errors are a mess, full of hard-coded figures. It's a nightmare to follow. As I'm working through the WP, I'm making little changes. Adding in the report name. Moving columns around so they follow the order you encounter them on the report. Changing the error calculations. I get it to a place I'm satisfied with it and hand it to Deborah for review. Well, Deborah is not at all happy. She's been doing this job for years and she liked it the way it was. I explained why I made changes and asked which bits weren't working for them and I could go back over those parts. As an example, there were parts of the paper that used different methods to display errors. I liked one better, so I used it across the paper. Deborah surely couldn't state that they liked it one way in one place, but disliked it in another place, right? Wrong. It was easier before, Deborah says. She had to spend time trying to understand the changes, which meant it took longer to review. And then Deborah gives me the following instructions. Just use last year's template and enter this year's data. Don't change the template at all or any of the formula. So I did exactly that. It took about half an hour and the result was absolute nonsense. Even a glance over it would reveal that the error calculations were glaringly incorrect. I was hoping she'd immediately see this and we could have an adult discussion about how to change it. A couple months go by and nothing. I take a look at the file and the WP is completely different. It's not the same as last year's and it's not mine, and at this point I'm pissed. I drop in a feedback meeting because I tried to hand in work I was proud of, and if it's not good enough I want her to at least tell me how I can improve. I just want Deborah to engage with me at this stage. It turns out Deborah handed the job to someone else to redo. When they came back, Deborah was still unhappy and redid it again herself, making many of the same changes I'd made initially. As we run through, I realize that Deborah's using a different report for the first section. So when she came to review it, she couldn't tie my figures up to the correct report, gave up after the first section, and instead of explaining the problem in a way that I could go through and fix it, just asked it to be redone in the prior year's format. Of course, when I redid it I used the wrong numbers again. Moreover, if Deborah had booked the walkthrough in before I did the work initially, I'd have known which report to use and could have avoided the mess altogether. The budget is blown out of the water with all the additional time on the job, but hey, unlike Deborah, I'm not graded on that. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.